Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. And today I basically wanted to make a video on my revision strategy when I used to prepare for NEET. I didn't really have like a really special or unique strategy. I used to just, do what mostly everyone else does. But I'll tell you like all of the specifics, all of the details that I did. And yeah, if you're new to the channel, my name's Anusha Verma and I scored 610 out of 720 in NEET 2025 with an All India rank of 790. And let's get started. So, firstly, I'll be talking about 11th, what I used to do for revision in 11th. And in 11th, I mean, it wasn't really that great of a strategy that I used to follow because, I mean, mostly it was just like I didn't know what else to do. So, if there was like, so first I'll talk about, during 11th when, we used to have like periodic tests. And so, what I used to do to revise for those tests, basically just revise my notes, okay, thoroughly revise my notes. How I used to revise my notes, I used to basically like write everything, like first I used to read everything from my notes, okay, then I used to write whatever I remembered on that whiteboard. And I used to basically try and like whenever I'm writing, I used to speak also so that it would like get etched into my memory. And yeah, that's how I used to revise it. It used to take me around 2 to 3 hours per chapter, but I mostly used to do it for physics and chemistry. I didn't really do bio on the whiteboard. I used to just read bio from the module. And yeah, that was like in 11th. I started to like I used to focus on more module for bio, but then later I kind of switched to NCERT, and then in 12th it was fully NCERT for bio. But anyways, that's like a totally different topic. Anyways, so what I used to do for 11th just before the periodic test was revise my notes by writing and speaking at the same time. And then I used to solve my module questions again. Like I had already solved them, but then I would solve them again, because sometimes they used to give the same questions in the test, so it would just be really helpful for that. And then what I used to do is I used to solve the PYQs again. I had already solved the PYQs. I would solve them again, right? Because they're just like more questions for practice. So I used to solve the PYQs again, and then I used to read the module for physics and chemistry. At least for chemistry, especially, I used to read the module, and for bio, I used to mainly, so the strategy was basically for physics and chemistry. What I used to do for bio, I would basically read my NCRT, and I would just go through the module and the notes. But mainly, I used to read NCRT only, and then I used to do the PYQs of bio again. And if there's time left, I used to do the module questions. Okay, but mainly it was like NCRT and PYQs for bio that I used to do. And on the day before the test, right, I used to just read NCRT of bio, and I used to do the PYQs of bio. And if there are any left like questions which I did not have time to solve for physics and chemistry, I should do that just the day before the test, right? So yeah, this is what I would do before my periodic test in 11th. And at the ending of 11th, when the full syllabus had gotten over of 11th and we were having the full syllabus tests for 11th, what I used to do then is I used to like read, obviously I used to revise my notes again, right? And if there's some topic that I'm weak in, which I'm not really comfortable with the concepts, then I used to watch these like revision lectures. They're on YouTube. Like I think like physics wala has a lot of these revision lectures in which they're just gonna basically go through the chapter again, explain it to the chapter again, just for those top chapters that like I used to find difficulty in. Okay, so I used to do that. Mainly it used to be for organic chemistry because that used to be my like little bit weak point. So you should watch those lectures for organic chemistry. And yeah, I used to like again go on the whiteboard, like write everything that I learned from the notes onto that whiteboard, and solve questions on the whiteboard, because I used to find it a lot more easier to solve questions on the whiteboard than in my notebook. Weird, but I used to do that. So yeah, then I would do the PYQs. But this time, like I feel like I used to solve physics PYQs a lot more than I used to solve chemistry and bio PYQs. Bio PYQs, I would really didn't solve much after 11th got over. I mainly used to focus on physics PYQs mainly, and chemistry also I used to do. But what I did differently in 11th ending is that whatever periodic tests we had gotten over through the full year, whatever major tests, ACT, whatever had done like that been done for the full year, I used to have the online PDF available on the Allen website. They have the online PDF available of all the tests that you've given so far. So then I used to solve those tests again, like every day I used to at least solve one test, or like in a week I would solve 2 to 3 tests. I used to solve them again and again, just so that, just for practice basically, because I wanted questions, right? I wanted more questions to practice. So I used to solve those. So I solved all of those tests whichever I had given throughout 11th, again at the ending of 11th, mainly around like January only, January February of 11th. So I did that in 11th. Nothing really special in 11th, because I was still learning the whole process, and like how you're supposed to study, how you're supposed to revise, and all of that. And then came 12th. So in 12th I started to, like, take my revision a little bit more seriously, because we had to revise 11th along with 12th, right? So that we don't end up like forgetting 11th. And one thing that I really, really like about my coaching is that they, started to, every time we would have the 12th ka regular tests, we would also have one 11th ka chapter each for physics, chemistry, and bio. So that, like, it used to motivate us to revise for 11th also, because if you want full marks, obviously you have to like know your 11th stuff. So they used to ask 5 questions each from 11th physics ka chapter, 12th physics ka chapter, and 11th physics, sorry, 11th physics ka chapter, 11th chemistry ka chapter, and 11th bio chapter. So they used to do that, which is really great. And if you're coaching Natsa too, it'll really help you for your revision. That's how I used to revise my 11th. Like if I had, once my 12th syllabus is done, or like while my 12th syllabus is going on, I would come home after coaching, and I would basically like, in the night or in the late evening, I would just go through my 11th cup notes again, and then I would solve 11th questions, because I wanted to do well in the upcoming test basically, right? So I had to revise 11th if I wanted to get good marks in the upcoming test of 12th. So that, got me to my regular habit of revising 11th regularly. And yeah, how I used to revise 11th is basically just read the notes again, right? That was my go-to thing, always the notes. I used to prefer notes over my module, for physics and chemistry. At least for bio I used to do NCERT, and for physics and chemistry I used to refer to my notes, and then I used to solve questions. So this time I began solving questions from NEET prep also. Otherwise I used to mainly stick to my module questions, but yeah, now I started to solve questions from NEET prep also. This was around like the mid of 12th, sorry. And yeah, that was for my periodic test, and how I used to revise 11th during the time my 12th was going on, right? And yeah, but again my habit was still continuing of, revising my notes. So what I used to do, my process was key, I'm gonna stand right there and I'm gonna read my notes. Okay, once I've read the notes, then I'm gonna keep the notebook in the side, and then whatever I have learned from that chapter, whatever I learned from the notes, I would basically, go systematically and like write down everything in there. Either I would make a flow chart, or I would just, write down all the stuff, all the important points, important formulas, and whatever I could think of. Again, I would try to explain it to myself, especially like a difficult concept. I would try to explain it to myself, so that I'm able to, get some more clarity on the cloudy topic, or like whatever topic I'm finding tough. That's what I used to do during my notes revision. And I also started making like this sheet in which I would write down all of my weak topics. So these were topics that I used to get regularly questions wrong in, silly mistakes that I used to find tough to, memorize, that I used to find tough to understand. So these were all these topics, and this was the sheet. So I'll upload the sheet on my Telegram channel, and I'll link the Telegram channel in my comments. So this was basically a sheet that I made, in which it was basically weak areas in prep. I know it's gonna be mirrored right now. I really don't know what to do about that. But yeah, for your reference, I'll upload the sheet on my Telegram. Anyways, I'll come to this later. We'll talk about this. But so what I started to do, this was like during 12th was going on, okay? So at the end of 12th is basically when I made these sheets, when my whole syllabus was over, right? So then I had a good clarity of what are my weak topics, what are my strong top topics. But I wasn't worried about my strong topics. I was more worried about my weak topics, right? Like everyone is, right? Because we want to improve our weak topics. So what I started to do, I made this sheet. Okay, and how I used to identify my weak topics is key. I would start solving questions of all the chapters. If I'm able to solve the question, that means that, if I'm able to get like 90% questions or more correct, then my chapter is like in a good position to go. But if I'm getting less than that correct, that means that it's like a little bit in a gray area. And if it's like really bad percentage of correct questions, then obviously I have to work on the chapter. Okay, so that's how I used to mainly decide, and mainly, also decide key, when do I need to revise this chapter. So if I'm feeling like कि मुझसे क्वेश्चंस नहीं बन रहे, मुझसे फॉर्मूला ही रिवाइज, मतलब मुझे फॉर्मूला ही याद नहीं है, राइट? So while I'm solving questions, I'll be like, oh wait, what was the formula? So that means I've forgotten the chapter. Then I would revise it. But if I'm able to, solve most of the questions, solve like 90% or more of the questions correctly, that means that this chapter is pretty strong for me. So I would not revise at that time. I would give more attention to a chapter that I wasn't able to, revise properly. That I wasn't able to solve questions from, that I would revise. Okay. And yeah, this is how I used to figure out which topics I had weak. And this was basically, it's something called as active recall. So if like you are, trying to help your brain to remember all the formulas or the facts and the statements or whatever while you're solving questions, right? Rather than reading the chapter and solving questions, you should solve questions and then read the chapter so that you know which points you're going to be weak at. Okay. And the main thing that I changed from 11th to 12th is that during my revisions and during, before the test period, I just focused on solving questions. I minimized the theory and maximized the question practice. So before the tests in 11th, ideally I would just be going through the chapters, modules, everything. I'd just be reading it again and again. But in 12th, what I started doing differently is that I started, solving more and more questions the day before the test. So I would like go to NEET prep or like go to the Allen app and whatever. I used to basically solve multiple questions, all of the different types of questions that I could find, and I was to just solve questions because that gives you an idea of the variety of questions that you may encounter during your tests, right? Which will again be helpful for you in NEET, right? So the more variety of questions, the better. But yeah, coming to this sheet now. So there are two sides to the sheet. On this first sheet, I've written weak areas in my prep, and this is basically here I would write the subject. Okay, so here it's mostly physics and chemistry. What you would say topics that I've used to find difficult. And then at the end, over here, at the end, I have written basically my bio ke weak topics. So, what are my bio ke weak topics? They were basically mollusca and echinodermata ke examples, because what I used to do is I used to mix and match those examples. I wouldn't be able to separate them and remember them as correct mollusks and echinoderms. And that eventually even came in the exam. So, I'm really glad for that. And also the excretory organs in animal kingdom. So in the excretion chapter in 11th grade, we have that whole in the introduction part, in the first and second page, there's this whole list of all of the excretory organs in different animals of the animal kingdom. So I used to find difficulty in remembering that. So these were my two of the most weakest topics in bio. There were a lot. I'm not saying I was some great god of bio. I don't know. There were a lot, but I these were the two things that I used to regularly get wrong in my tests, and I used to forget regularly. So I wrote these here. Coming to my physics and chemistry ke weak topic. So since it might be mirrored in the screen, so I'll just read it from here, and I'll upload it in my Telegram. And before that, in the second page, right, in the second page, I have made like a Excel sheet kind of table in which I have noted down all of the bio ke chapters in 11th and 12th. Okay, so this side is all the bio ke chapters for 11th and 12th, and this is how many times I have read it. Okay, this is how many times I have read it. This is like the PYQs, how many I have done. I didn't really maintain this sheet, but I obviously did PYQs. It was not like I didn't do PYQs. I did PYQs, I just did not maintain it. And then like MCQ practice. Oh no, this is MIB, which is like masterclass in biology. The whole it's Dr. N.K. Sharma's book. It's also great. So I didn't really maintain this part as much as I maintained this part. So you might feel like, oh, why is it empty? I did revise, I did do that, but I just didn't maintain the sheet. Okay? Because I kind of like I lost track of how many times I was reading, how many revisions I made, and all of that. So it became really hard. So basically, the whole columns here are chapter name, NCERT reading out of 10, how many times I've read NCERT, PYQs out of 3 times, how many times I've solved PYQs, and MIB out of 2, how many times I've solved it. Active recall, that means basically trying to like solve questions and then going and seeing which chapters I've gotten which questions I've gotten wrong, and then mistake revision from my mistake book, which I'll make a separate video on. Okay. And this, when did I make this sheet? I made this sheet on 1st of January, like in the first week of January. I'm pretty sure it's 1st of January, but if it's not, then it's definitely the first week of January that I made this. So January onwards, this was basically my sheet that I made in 11. So sorry, not 11, 12. So I made this in like the first week of January 2025, and I used to maintain it. I used to mainly maintain this front wala part. Okay, so what I used to do in this, written over here physics, and it's written relative velocity in 2 dimensions. This used to be my very weak topic, so I wrote it first because I knew I was going to get this wrong, and I used to get it wrong a lot in my tests. So I used to do that. And then over here is written chapter name, and then it's written revision out of 10, how many times I have done. And then over here in the last one, it's written MCQ practice. So serial number, chapter name, revision, and MCQ practice. How many times have done? Like just a tick mark basically. So this was for physics. Then the other one is also physics. This is rolling motion, right? Because rolling motion was also my weak chapter. And then next comes chemistry, Schrodinger equation. I was like kind of like I didn't know whether it was included in its syllabus or not, because it was pretty dicey at that point. So I just decided to learn it, but of course I wasn't really good at it, so it was like pretty weak for me. And then this is also chemistry, which is chemical thermodynamics and energies. Is that the correct chapter? Yes, thermodynamics and energetics. Yeah, this was also a very weak chapter for me. Like this was the only physical chemistry chapter which I was really weak at. So I started to, I used to focus more on this. I used to get a lot of the PYQs wrong in this, which is why I wrote it. And yeah, so continuing, next is solubility and thermal stability. This is from chemical bonding. This also used to be very weak in thermal stability. Is basically, it's also in chemical bonding, so I used to be really weak in that. And then P block, I have written P block also over here, right, from 13th group to 18th group. This also used to be very weak for me, so I wrote that. Salt analysis, EM waves, the power and intensity relation. I used to get this wrong all the time. That's why I wrote this. So, I would advise you to make a sheet like this and note down all of the topics that you feel like तुम्हें डर लगता है उनसे, क्योंकि मुझे इन सारे चैप्टर से बहुत डर लगता था. चैप्टर्स भी नहीं, मतलब टॉपिक से बहुत डर लगता था. ठीक है, so I used to write them down and I used to regularly see the sheet, and I used to be like, okay, I need to revise this. Then I wrote time spent in finite magnetic field. This is in your magnetism wala chapter in 12th. Then self and mutual inductance of solenoid. Like there's a formula for both of these, self and mutual inductance. So I used to get that wrong all the time. And then standing waves, I got it wrong. Like it was like pretty weak for me. Nuclear philicity and leaving group order, pretty weak. Torricelli's theorem, level of fluid, when the ice melts, right, depending on whether the density of the fluid is more or less than water, it differs, like whether the level will go up or down. So I used to forget that. And then the bond parameters, like bond strength relations, bond length relations, all of that. So this was like in my module, so I used to get that like pretty messed up. And then number of geometrical isomers and optical isomers, this also used to, like there's this formula, right, 2 to the power something something. So I used to get that. I used to forget it basically. And then my bio weak things. And then at the end of the next page I had also written like the chemistry chapters, all of the chemistry chapters of NCERT and how many times I've read them. This I made it like around March end. Just I added the chemistry part to it because I wanted to keep track of how many times I've read my chemistry NCERT also. So yeah, this was something that I did for my revision during NEET. Yeah, if you found it helpful, great. I'm really happy to help. And if you have any questions, any video recommendations, I'd love to know it in the comments. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and bye bye.